is the trunk lid pistons. I changed them once before, and I went with an aftermarket type on Amazon. The problem is these things right here. They literally unscrew themselves as you drive, and then they pop out. So going with a Delco setup now, which is that number there, and they're the perfect length, and they don't come apart, so should be much improved over that. We don't need more lifting capacity, I just don't want them to fall apart as you drive. Now, even though these ones actually lifted fine and they had no issues, it's just that unscrewing ends that created issues. So with the new Delco piece, and there's your part number again, it's definitely reliable, not going to undo itself, and should just pretty much work like the original. So top tip, don't go aftermarket, especially if they disassemble themselves while you drive. One of the benefits of new pistons on the trunk is when you pop it with your key fob, like so, it actually lifts high enough to get your finger under there, and it flies up like that. A lot of people like to add a spring or something here, which can help. Mine could use a spring in addition to new pistons on my FRC, but this one seems to be popping up pretty good. But that's step one of this little process we're doing here. So this is a 2004 Z06, and pretty much every option you'd want, everything's been perfected. I mean, you get into mine, like, which is a 99, there's some stuff that just isn't on it. Like, I don't have the airbag shutoff switch for the passenger side. They had a little light there. I mean, there's little refinements. This one, you can active handling it while driving, where mine has to be stopped. One thing this doesn't have that mine has, which is, you know, something I did, the shifter. Factory shifters in these things are just, I've always hated them. And the MGW shifter, which I put in mine, was like a game changer, at least in my opinion. Not too notchy, just felt right. Different shift knob, all that good stuff. So we're going to take this apart here and get the new shifter in. I mean, just, it's amazing how far this thing goes to. I mean, it's horrible. And then the knob is kind of squishy. It's pretty lame. So gonna remove all this good stuff here to get to that. And this isn't a how-to or anything, but I'll show you a little bit along the way. Typical sticky steering wheel, which that needs to be cleaned too. We have the product for that, but nice car. It's got the red interior like the Z06 was optional on. 13,000 miles. It's pretty much mint. As I said, we're doing a shifter here in the Z06, MGW shifter. See your torque tube down there. There's the bolts where it goes. I did one of these in my C5 as well. Very nice shifter. Lots of complaints of it being too notchy. I have no issues with it though. I did see one thing though. There's your temperature sensor up inside that little hole there next to the ignition. Mine doesn't have that. Mine has the base heater controls and that. Now what's funny is the Z06 did not net a better shifter from the factory. So you really have the same sloppy long throw shifter as you did on the regular C5. You have the Z06 gauges there though. Those are pretty slick. And then down here, mine has this as well. A lot of your C5s will have, you know, the two buttons here, trunk pop, and then fog lights. Z06 doesn't have fog lights. My FRC doesn't have fog lights. And then, like I showed you earlier, this is a red seating interior, and it does include the kick panel, glove box, and then the door panels as well. But definitely not a ton of options on the Z06, but it didn't really need a ton really. So I'm gonna start getting the MGW shifter installed. They give you some sound deadening and stuff to put on the torque tube, which helps quiet all this down. So get that in there, then we'll start bolting it all back together. But yeah, I'm gonna give you a little update on this process. So after much sound insulation, heat insulation, they give this to y'all with the kit here. That is the internals or the whole, that's the whole shifter right there, short of the shaft for the knob. But it is an amazing shifter. I love this thing. I've put it in mine, and I'll tell you, it was something else. But it's a new lower box down there, new upper half. The only thing you retain is there's a, if you can see that little silver bit right there, there's a rod that goes all the way through. That's it. And assuming that's in good shape on yours, you just transfer that over. Very good online instructions by them. I mean, which if you've done any form of shifter, I've done it in a number of cars, it always seems like the bolts wiggle loose, it's noisier. You know, there's just always some drawback to it, where this one, I didn't find any on mine. Between all the sound insulation they give you, I mean, it's stuck, there's some right on this side here, there's some on the torque tube, it's a ton of stuff they give you. And then there's even, if you can see these, there's little Allen bolts under here, like that's your main bolts that go to the shifter. There's little ones under there that lock in those bolts to not come off of there. And they even give you the gasket that goes between the shifter and the lower box, which eliminates some sound as well. So overall, very complete kit. I mean, it should be for how much this shifter costs, but it's a very nice setup. So getting all this done, we are going to a C6 style knob and boot, which the boot actually fits pretty well to the C5 console, so that's going to go in there as well. And then we should have a finished product here in the next shot. But just want to show you this, you know, if you're ever doing one of these, that's kind of what it looks like. But all right, here we go. One of the funnier things I always thought about the Z06, I know I'm about 90% sure they changed the pad compound from the factory, but that's about it. Same calipers, they just painted them red, and they even didn't go as far as painting the caliper holder there, that, I don't know what you call that extra bracket that goes around. So you have this like unpainted part and red part, and there's companies that'll paint those and powder coat them for you and stuff. But kind of an interesting fun fact on those C5 Z06 brakes, not much different than the standard, and they're pretty solid as is. I mean, they could be better obviously, but just a little coating of red on them, that's it. For the longest time when the Z06 came out, I thought when they said these front mesh inserts are here, I always thought those were the brake cooling ducts, but they weren't. The brake cooling ducts are down here, and we'll see them moving there, and I didn't even know that every C5 had that. So I was on this search for brake ducts and this and that. Turns out my car already has them, like every C5, and all these do is these are really just for show, and they do block a little bit, because if you look at my FRC, which doesn't have fog lights, there's just a big piece of plastic behind there, and then a nicer C5, will say, has fog lights in that piece of plastic. This one just has the mesh insert there. It's like a whole big assembly, and then there's nothing behind it. So I mean, I guess you could say it is allowing some airflow into there, but those are really just for looks as far as I'm concerned, and maybe a little bit of protection and cooling. But kind of a fun fact, everybody, at least I thought they were, that was brake cooling ducts that led to the brakes, but that's actually down there. I wanted to real quick show this bit. This is where they really emphasize their seriousness with this shifter. When you watch the video, they tell you exactly how to trim this boot, which is, this is the factory part, and then the second and third bump there, those are the MGW, and the way that you cut the factory one, it perfectly fits against there. And if you cut this too big, you just round it out or egg shape it, you get road noise and all that here. So another factory part reused, just slightly modified. But next we're ready for the stick and reassembly here. So moving right along. Finished product, there it is. C6 boot. It fits pretty well. I mean, it's got a little bit of, you know, I don't know how to say that, a little lower, like it's not flat across, it's almost like a little excessive, but it works fine. You just shove all the plastic bits up under the console, and there you go. And then a C6 knob. Now the later C6 knob, it had like a little interlocking ring, which is kind of a nice little finishing bit because it holds it real tight against the C6 knob there. But there we are, and I think it's half the length of the factory shifter. Knob feels better in your hand. It's just it's a much needed upgrade on these C5s. Even if you did just the upper half MGW and a different knob, I think you're gonna be way better. So that's done. Next thing we're gonna move on to is column lock in this car. And it doesn't have the bypass installed or any of that stuff, so you don't get stranded. I've heard 04s aren't as bad. I don't know if that's a fact or not, but still gonna put it in there and get that going. So column lock, bypass, and then I think I'm gonna be done with this guy for the time being here. So on the C5, all the, we'll say, electronics, fuse box, it's passenger footwell. There's a cover that comes off. This is different than mine. Mine actually has a like a latch almost mechanism. This one is just, they actually put like almost like a Velcro on it, but dated 6/1 of 2004. It's one of the last C5s they made here. I don't know the production actually, but I have to check. Anyways, you can see our whole setup is back in here, and everything we're doing is on the BCM over here, and I actually have the it's right there. It's a little barrel-like looking thing. You wire it all incorrectly. 2 wires go to the lower connector, and another wire goes to the top connector, and then you ground it down here on that tab, and then that thing just clicks back into there. Now mine was interesting. I actually had to do 1 more wire on my 99 to get rid of the message that says service column lock, but the whole point of this is to basically make it so your steering wheel doesn't lock and you're not stranded. I actually have the unlocker kit, which you're supposed to keep in your glove box in case that happens, but it never ended up needing it. So if you're interested in that, I'll get that to you. Send me a message here or something, but we should be good. Everything's wired up, tucked back in, got some new zip ties on there just to hold it in place. And I'm gonna hit the key here and make sure everything works right. So if this all worked right and everything's wired incorrectly, it shouldn't say pull key, anything like that on here. You're supposed to, and I've tried this a couple times, seems all right. Short of the SLP black wing air intake there, this is a bone stock LS6, 13,000 miles. Super clean car. I think we bought it, it had maybe 4,000 or 5,000 miles, I forget. But I mean, it's a very well preserved example of what this car can and should be if you're looking for one. Even all the way to the shiny, sticky steering wheel, which I have to laugh at. That's just something. But very nice car, very fun to drive, and you know, it has a little history to it too, as far as like this being the first time they brought the Z06 back since the 60s, and quite a machine as far as Corvettes go, and how well this thing can run for being you know, designed in the mid 90s overall. But something else. And I mean, things I notice on this car which are not the same on mine. My pieces have a crack on the passenger side. These things always crack. This one doesn't have that. I mean, it's funny. This is like if you're looking to see how something was on the last of the C5s, this is it. Not really much has been changed. We got it from somebody that literally had a laminated window sticker in it, and but yeah, definitely very clean and very nice car. Now that though we've changed the shifter and put on the column lock bypass on and that, but it's a nice car for sure. Well, that's going to do it here on this little video. Just did a few little odds and ends that have been sitting around for a while. Figured I'd take care of them for my dad on his car here. And if you want to see more on this car or have any ideas or anything that should happen to this, let us know. I will say though, driving this back to back from this in my FRC, you definitely notice 70 more horsepower, give or take, maybe 50, 60 more. And you definitely notice the ride quality in this, having those Z06 shocks, and If I'm not mistaken, the springs are different too, the transverse springs. It is a lot bouncier than my FRC with the Z51 setup, so definitely worth noting if you're interested in one of these things. I mean, most times you're not taking this car on a long trip. I would not recommend the Z06 on a long trip. I've done it with this one and it wasn't that enjoyable, but man, it's a neat car though. All right, thanks for watching. See you next time here at Rubber City Motoring. Subscribe for more. If you want that column lock unlocker, let me know. Can talk about that. And if you want to see more on this car, comment below. Let me know what you think, and we'll see you next time.